You're so coy, alluring, angel with a wicked smile, sleeping 20 hours a day, never lay a paw on dusty clay. I'll keep your litter natural, no chemicals in your nostrils, just corn below, so every time you go you'll know your don't stink. World's best cat litter for the world's best cat.
Life's big decisions aren't always easy, but you don't have to figure them out alone. Psychic Source connects you with trusted psychics who offer real insight, not just predictions. Whether it's love, career, or life's big questions, you'll get honest, judgment-free guidance in a private, safe space, anytime, 24/7. And if your reading doesn't feel right, it's free. Take control of your future. Get a reading for just 83 cents per minute, plus 3 minutes free. Visit PsychicSource.com and use promo code HELLO25 to get started. Psychic Source, insight when you need it most.
Blog Talk Radio.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. Got a great show for you tonight. As always, we're going to be starting off with a very interesting round of Coach's Corner, and I've got two fantastic golf professionals here with me on the panel tonight, and I'll introduce those two in just a moment. And then a little bit later on in the show, it's actually a reschedule from May 10th. Unfortunately, that particular date, my special guest, who's going to be on this evening, was not able to join me. And so we've rescheduled him for tonight. And, of course, I'm talking about Chris Rodell. He's the author and writer of Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King, a great new book that was just introduced a few weeks back. And he's going to be joining me on the second half. Hopefully everything will go well tonight, and he'll be on. But let me just remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central here on the blogtalkradio.com network. And, of course, best way to find us is go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, or simply type Golf Talk Live up in the search key. And, of course, the show will be there front and center. For some reason, if you can't join us live, not to worry. You can just scroll down on that page and you'll find the on-demand section. And that's where all of the shows, including tonight's show, will be there in its entirety in the recorded version. So if you can't join us live, folks, not to worry. You can tune in and listen anytime that's convenient for you. You can also listen on some other great social media platforms like iTunes.com, Stitcher.com, and now, of course, TuneIn.com. And again, just type in Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to the respective page. Also, don't forget to join me every Tuesday mornings on the same networks from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, I'm talking about my other program, Tuesday mornings, the Women of Golf Show, with my very good friend and co-host, Cindy Miller, of course, an LPGA professional and a member of the Legends Tour. She's been off for a couple of weeks, but she's going to be back on this week, this Tuesday coming up. And, of course, we're going to be interviewing some great guests on that program as well. So make sure you tune into that one as well. Also, I update on social media, on Facebook, under a number of different golf groups, and also on my personal page, so you can find who's going to be on the shows and upcoming dates and so forth. You can also follow me on Twitter at TenenbuckCEO. CEO is in capital letters. I also promote through Twitter and also at LinkedIn.com under my personal page. So lots of great ways to listen to the show and lots of great ways to stay connected with the shows as well. So make sure that you follow along, and hopefully we'll keep coming out with some great topics and some interesting discussions. All right, I've got two great guests on the Coach's Corner panel tonight. First up is John Hughes, PGA Master Professional and President of the North Florida PGA Section, and a recipient of the 2013 PGA of America's Horton Smith Award, and also a top 30 instructor with Golf Tips Magazine. Also rounding out the panel tonight is Peter Agazarian. He's a PGA and TPI certified teaching professional with Draconic Golf Club. He's also the head men's golf coach with the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, and also the founder of Northeast Golf Performance and a member of the Proponent Group. Guys, welcome to Coach's Corner on Golf Talk Live.
Hi, Ted.
Hi, Ted. Great to be here.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, guys, and thanks for joining me tonight again on Coach's Corner. All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about I gave you just a very brief snippet, if you will, before we went live, and we're going to talk a little bit about clinics, and, of course, I'm talking about golf clinics. And then last week, as I mentioned, with the panel, Chuck Evans and Jamie Leno-Zimron, we talked about playing lessons, and I had each of them sort of walk through a typical playing lesson that they might have with some of their students. We're going to do a little bit with you guys tonight, maybe put a few different twists on it, but that'll be sort of the second half of the discussion. But I want to start out, and John, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind, about clinics. And I want to talk about, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, so we'll try to, keep it grounded to specific topics and that. But let's talk about some of the key components to producing a successful golf clinic from the teaching professional standpoint, and then we want to talk about, from the student standpoint, some things that they should expect from the clinics and some things that clinics maybe they should be looking out for. So let's start off with some of the key components, maybe clinics that you've done that you've found that have made a successful golf clinic.
Well, thanks, Ted, again for having me on. It's always a pleasure being on board with you and Peter. As far as successful clinics, I think the number one thing that I really try to stress is totally understanding the people in the clinic, not just from a general sense, but from a more specific sense. Everybody has different reasons to play golf, and most of the people who go to clinics are fitting into a couple of different baskets, whether it's budgetary reasons, maybe they're a little shy to take a private lesson, a little bit embarrassed, or maybe they're just looking for a refresher. That's what I find to be the three biggest baskets. But even within the three biggest baskets, there's specifics there that once you dig into and understand what those specifics are, it makes it a little bit easier for the instructor to do whatever personalization possible within the framework of the clinic. Most clinics are very generic, very vanilla, I guess is the best way to say it, from a planning standpoint of view, as far as a timing standpoint of view. And it has to be that way because of the potential amount of people you would have in a clinic, but you can still personalize so long as you're listening before, during, and after the clinic, before with maybe a player profile, maybe a telephone call, maybe an inquisitive email. But then having everybody being introduced at the beginning of the clinic to each other, sharing some information, that gets things off to a really good start for everybody to get to know one another, have everybody understand their expectations of themselves individually, but what they're expecting of the clinic. And you're going to find that little nugget that's really going to create that relationship a little bit deeper for you with each and every person there, versus just being at arm's length from everybody, staying in that generic frame of mind.
Right. Well said. And Peter, let me ask you with maybe a little bit of a different twist. You know, we've often seen and heard about a lot of different golf schools, and I sort of classify them a little bit differently. Golf schools tend to be, and I'm going to steal John's terminology here, a little more generic. They may have a short game golf school, or they might have an overall golf school, but clinics can be a little bit more specific. Is there a number? I mean, obviously I know you've done some clinics as well of various levels of golf, maybe some junior clinics, and of course for some of our more seasoned golfers out there. But is there a number of students that you comfortably feel is a good number to work with, and what are some of the key components that you like to focus on in a clinic, and why?
It just depends. The number of people depends definitely on the intent of the clinic. You always want to keep it at a 6 to 7 to 1 ratio. Just if it's a junior clinic for safety purposes, if it's a more advanced clinic that you're trying to just really have the people be best informed. Or if it's a golf school, you're really putting on a show for a generally small group of people. I personally keep all of my golf schools very small. I like to keep them to 3 or 4 people. But it really depends on the intent. We have a junior clinic that we run that's very introductory. It's very fun. And really there's no cap on it. We want as much participation as possible. We get, sometimes 30 kids coming. And at that point, it's kind of all hands on deck with a professional staff. And we make sure that, obviously with a junior clinic setting, it's first of all safe. And we want them to have fun, but we want to make sure they're leaving there with having learned at least one thing. Something they're taking away that's going to, either make them enjoy the game or help them in the long term play better. In an adult setting, I can't say it's much different. And just like John said, you really want to tailor things to your audience. That's the first thing you learn about teaching or speaking is that, like John said in the beginning, you get to know each other a little bit. You don't rush things. You help the people there get to know each other. That way they're more comfortable. They're more likely to learn better. Or likely to make friends and play golf with each other. It's the entire intent. Then you can tailor the information, make sure they're taking away something that's important to them. And I always make that very clear. I say, we're going to probably talk about a few things today. We're going to offer some options, but please just, consider maybe the most important thing that you can take away from our time together. And if you frame that up front and you get them in that type of mindset where they don't feel like they need to remember all of it, then it can be the most productive for that individual person.
Right, exactly. Well said. And I agree with both. The great thing about this profession, guys, is there are so many options and so many variables that you can interject into our day-to-day teaching. As an example, if you're dealing with a specific group of businessmen, you may want to, in addition to specific areas, and John, I'm going to throw this to you in a section to maybe expand a little bit. You may want to interject a little business golf, talking about some of the benefits of business types and business people coming to these clinics, because there's a lot of advantages, not only about learning how to play golf, but learning how to build and develop relationships on the golf course. Is this something that you have also maybe done with some of the clinics and focused specifically and targeted business people within your community? That was for John. John, are you with me? Oh, I guess. Oh, there he is.
I'm here.
Hi, John. Yeah, I'm sorry we got dropped.
I got did.
John, I don't know.
That's
did
my
you hear
fault. I did. I heard the question, and absolutely, I targeted clinics towards business people as the former national director of instruction for Golf Digest schools. That was a heavy emphasis for us because a lot of corporate moguls, I'll use that term, came to us for advice on an individual basis, and we were able to turn that around into a group setting, whether it was team building, whether it was sales initiations and closing deals, whether it was HR issues. There's a lot of things that can be accomplished on the golf course. And from a clinician standpoint of view, it was us trying to help each one of these business people understand the right way to close the deal, the right way to address certain issues of business, whether it's to a customer or a fellow employee, beyond just the X's and O's of golf. I think the biggest thing that a business person can take out of those is something that I live by. I've never hired an accountant or never have hired an attorney without first taking them out on the golf course. And that's normally the first thing I head to the pass with each and every one of the business people. That the way you handle yourself on the golf course is going to be indicative of how you handle someone's business. And that's the very first thing I address individually as well as within a clinic setting.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You're exactly right, and I do the same thing. Over the years, I've had a lot of people approach me. Years ago when I owned another company, I had a lot of people, of course, wanting to get my business. And at the time, I was very selective. Now, I didn't always get an opportunity to necessarily play golf, but we would even just sometimes meet up at the course, and maybe we'd be hitting golf balls, and I would watch how they handle themselves. Even on the range, you can learn a lot in discussions and sometimes in a setting. But you're exactly right. There's a lot of opportunities there. Peter, I'm going to do something a little bit differently with you. I know that as the head men's coach, that you have obviously working with some younger, future players out there, and I imagine that a lot of times you'll pull information from what you're working on there and maybe put it in a clinic with other juniors. Are you specific with some of the juniors in some of your clinics, and as an example, maybe focusing on more scoring or short game clinics to try and help them to be able to dial in, as opposed to just a general clinic where you're working on fundamentals or that sort of thing? Do you get more specific when you're working with more established players?
Absolutely, and it's very specific to the player. But I operate 2 different junior elite programs up here. And it's the conversations are very individual. They're somewhat technical when if you need to step in and talk about their swing a little bit, but I would say we talk about emotional skills far more than anything else, because you're dealing with anybody. I have a competitive 12-year-old that I coach all the way up to 18 college. You're talking about kids. You're talking about children who, at best have a lot of new attention coming their way. There are people that are just strictly well-wishing them. They want them to do well. They want them to succeed in playing golf or school or whatever it might be, but it's new to them. It's very, very new attention, and we talk at length about it, about how the player feels about it. Everybody shares so they know they're in it together. And I talk to the parents about it a lot, and I say, Rick or Sally is really doing well. There's a lot of people I can see on social that are wishing them well. It's all great things, but this is all brand new attention for them. And, as a mom or dad or parents, it's best if you sit down with them and just ask them how they feel about it. I find that to be the conversation a lot more. How are they going to manage their own emotions on the golf course, obviously, but away from that, there's to them, there's far more pressure. They just mainly, I would say, put on themselves because they don't want to let people down. But these are all very real things that end up being discussed. And I would say 90% of the time, Ted, it's all this attention is coming from with the best intentions. And then there's the other 10% that you need to have a conversation about some negative attention or negative, things that are going on, in their life that's affecting their golf or whatever it might need to have the conversation be. But when you're talking about that age group and, the conversations I have with them, it's far more about managing their emotions, their external environment, and then that ends up in turn helping how they play. So, but
yeah, I agree. I think it's important, and it's key, and it brings to mind something interesting I've heard. I've heard this many times before, but somebody that I was watching on TV not too long ago said this, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but the general gist of the statement was that everything that happens to you, 10% of it is what happens, and 90% is how you react to it. And I think that's true with everything. I think that, obviously we have different scenarios and things that go on in our lives, and even that out in the golf course. And really, a lot of it is how we handle the situation. We might get into some trouble or a bad lie or hit some errant shots. But depending on how we handle or react to the situation is going to dictate how we move forward from that. So emotions and feelings in that play very heavy into golf, much more than ball striking ability. Of course, that's important too. But if you watch some of the top players, how they handle themselves on the golf course tells a lot about how they ultimately are going to end up playing. They're all going to hit some good and bad shots over the course of time, but it's how they handle themselves on the golf course is going to dictate whether they're going to be successful in closing the deal, John, as you had mentioned. John, I want to throw this back to you, and what I want to do this time is sort of flip the switch a little bit. We've talked a little bit about sort of our agenda, if you will, or our thought process in going into clinics. But let's talk a little bit about from the other side of it, from the person coming. So if I was coming to take a clinic with either one of you, what should I expect from that experience, and what should I be looking for and particularly paying attention to be able to get the most out of it?
Well, Peter used a great term before, intent, and not all clinics are alike. They're not built the same. Each one does have a separate intent. So you've got to take your own inventory. What are you looking to accomplish? Are you a beginner? Are you an advanced beginner? Or are you a more advanced player? And you're just looking for some group help or group support. You've got to take that inventory and then try to match it up to what clinics are available and what they have to offer. One of the biggest things we hear from a PGA standpoint of view on a national level is just that, expectations, and is the programming of the PGA meeting the expectation of the average golfer?
Right.
And that's why you constantly will see these different programs thrown out. It's in an effort to try to please the masses. As an individual, you've got to take your inventory, ask questions of the instructor prior to registering for the clinic. Ask them what should be expected or what you should expect from them. What kind of time frame? What's the content? Are there extras being thrown in? Do I need to bring anything extra besides myself and the golf clubs? Who else is going to be there? How big is the size of the clinic? How personalized is it going to get? All these add up to the perceived value of what you're going to pay for that clinic. If it's a free clinic or a relatively inexpensive clinic, you're going to have to expect less. And when you expect less, you're going to receive a whole lot more. But when the clinic is a little bit more costly, I run a derivative of Get Golf Ready that I call Play Golf Now. And it's pared down a bit from Get Golf Now, but I deliver a whole lot extra with it, and I charge a little bit more for it, but they get a whole lot more out of it. And I'm very keen on my side to ask the right questions, so I put the right people in it, and I'm always asking them to ask me questions so they feel comfortable, so the customer, that student, feels comfortable with the environment they're going to place themselves into. Remember, life's choice. Life is a game of choices. You've got to make the correct choice based on your inventory, what you're trying to accomplish, and what long-term value you're seeking to get out of each clinic you attend.
Yeah, and that raises an interesting, hypothesis, Peter, in that what John's talking about is obviously there's going to be a lot of differences. And I think one of the things from a student's perspective, there's obviously different types of clinics out there, whether it be a short game, maybe a bunker clinic, all that type of thing. But with the onslaught of the information that's available out there now to the average student, I think we're finding, as all professions do, but the golf profession is certainly no different, that the students, if you will, or the general public is sort of driving where their interests are and not so much coming from the other way. So from a student's perspective, is that something that they should be bringing to the table as well and say, this is what we're interested in learning about, We love golf, but these areas over there are not as important maybe as they once were. So how do we find that balance as instructors and as students? Is that a good thing, helping to drive the industry in a particular direction?
Ted, was that for me?
Yes, I'm sorry, Peter. I'm sorry, I thought I said Peter. My apologies. Yes, that was for you.
That's all right. No, it's a good question. To be honest with you, it's there's so much information out there available. People think about it, an unlimited amount of information accessible to any player. To what extent don't we have a clinic that's just to help people weed through all of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
True, because honestly, in a lot of clinic settings, I end up answering questions about a YouTube video that they watched, and helping the person understand what the personality giving, putting out the content meant by X or Y. Even in private sessions, there's a lot of time compartmentalizing, their thoughts and all the inputs they've received. So I think to some extent it maybe falls on us to acknowledge the fact that there's that much out there, to put out a clinic where you can call it Ask the Coach or Ask the Pro, and you make it very informal, and you can make it whatever you want it to be as far as cost go or whatever. But make it very clear that you're a resource. You're there to answer questions, to clarify. You can really take it to that level of empathy for the player, whatever their level might be. And I think empathy might be the biggest thing we can have as coaches. When you're talking to players or you're working to help them, is to have empathy as to where they're coming from.
Well said. You're exactly right. John, just a final question I'm going to throw out there about clinics. I'm a firm believer in having an honest discussion and dialogue, no matter sometimes even if it's not the most popular. And I wonder, just based on what Peter just said, with information available, is one of the dangers in the golf industry that things like clinics are going to become obsolete? And the reason why I asked, let me just phrase the question in such a way, because there is so much information available, good or bad, is it becoming harder and harder for us as professionals to offer some of the tools, if you will, of the trade that we normally have done for many, many years? Is it hard to compete with that? And what do we need to do in order to, adapt or make changes in order to sort of address that particular issue?
That's a great question. What you're talking about is the evolution of a clinic. Will clinics go away, become obsolete? Absolutely not. Simply because of the points I mentioned earlier, whether it's budget, too embarrassed or a little bit too shy to do a private lesson. Those
right.
two are the contributing factors, and we'll always have clinics. But I think what you're going to see evolving into clinics is more virtual clinics where
yep.
an instructor is wherever in the world, and you're able to log on through the internet no matter where you are in the world, and not only get and receive coaching from this particular individual, but have a two-way conversation. There's already platforms out there now. I'm using one
yes.
more on an individual basis right now, but I have the ability to put up to 500 people on this platform and actually do a virtual
yep.
clinic for next to nothing for people as far as what the costs are, not only to me but to the people attending. No, they'll never go out of style. I think there'll always be a reason for it. The biggest reason is what you and Peter just alluded to. There's so much information out there. Peter and I and you are as guilty as anyone else to continuing to feed the monster. So we have to be able to be there to help people digest it, understand it, and be able to regurgitate it in how they perform on the golf course. And the future of all this will be more virtual. But at the end of the day, it's still a people business for us. You're still going to have to touch and feel each other and look at each other in the face from 2 feet away at some point to accomplish a lot of the goals that most golfers have in their mind. So past the virtual clinic, that's going to spur on private. That's probably going to spur on actual people showing up at actual golf facilities to take an actual clinic at some point.
Yep.
But it's going to evolve that way, and it already has to a certain extent.
Yeah, you're exactly right. In fact, I know of a number of individuals that, of course, have been on, including yourself, John, that have been on the Coaches Corner panel and guests alike that are already doing that now. And I think, Peter, just very quickly, if you want to add some thoughts to this, I think that John's exactly right. I think the virtual clinic is something, and a lot of it I think has to do with not the fact that the student doesn't want to maybe come out and do a face-to-face at this particular time, but time restrictions. A lot of people are very busy. They don't have the time. One of the great things about a lot of these online or virtual clinics, as John put, is most of them have the ability to either join in during a live clinic, or they can pay and go in and watch after the fact. They may not be able to interact at that time, but they can go in and partake in some of these virtual clinics after the fact through a recorded version. So what are your thoughts there? Do you agree with that? And do you see that as part of the evolution of the next stage of golf?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think it's going to end up going to the extent of VR for sure. At some point, you'll be sitting in your house with some glasses on, taking a clinic, and you'll be in a VR setting. Hopefully, I'm around for that because I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, I completely agree. It's definitely going by that way because people don't have time. I mean, the people I talk to that they really have to put in a big effort to make make a clinic, put together time to do a program. I get it, and I think we're definitely going to be going that way. There's some companies that are have tried to do it, are currently doing it, and it's only going to get more realistic and streamlined.
Yeah, and there's so many. Other areas in business, other products out there that allow you to do this already. And I think, obviously, we've seen some in the past, and as you were alluding to, Peter, it's going to get better and better. I think in addition to the time factor, I think, as John, as you pointed out, I think cost is going to become an issue. I mean, it is so much less expensive to put on a virtual clinic than it is to have people to come out to the golf course, and now you're using a facility, and of course the facility, has to make a profit. So they're looking to add to their bottom line, if you will. So I can see the virtual clinics, as both of you have mentioned. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I want to jump now to on the second half here a little bit. And as I mentioned, we talked about this last week with my other guests on the Coaches Corner panel. That was about playing lessons. Let's walk through a typical playing lesson, what you try to, and Peter, I'm going to start with you this time first, if we, just to, in a matter of fairness to both of you, and then John, I'll get you to come in. Typically, how many holes do you like to play during a playing lesson, or how long of a session? I mean, obviously, I know it can vary. Do you like to do with your students in order to get the best benefits in a reasonable period of time? Again, giving time restrictions.
Yeah, of course. There's
Peter,
definitely time restrictions. Yeah, time restriction is definitely crucial. I would say, like I said before, the intent of being on the golf course together, because I do part of my coaching programs is the first step is to be on the golf course together. So that's generally 3 or 4 holes, just to get a sense of, get to know the person, get to know their game, get to see, get to know that, and get to chat and see what's going to make the most sense for what kind of program that they want to be involved with. And then at that point, we prioritize parts of their game, and then we go from there. For most people, they opt for a 9-hole playing session, which is anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. They get an immense amount out of that. It's generally on a one-on-one scenario. And then sometimes there's competitive players that want an 18-hole playing lesson, and they want that experience. They want to be just, helped through the ebb and flow of that 18-hole round, and it's important to them. But I work on the golf course a lot. I prefer it. People around here see that I have a TrackMan, and they think I'm a person that's going to be set up on the range somewhere. There's some days that I don't take it out at all, and I'm on and off the golf course between 4 and 5 times for various periods of time, just because you can have such better conversations about not just the mechanic, past the mechanics. It goes to decision making, addressing uneven lies, types of shots, where you can play certain short game shots too, so that helping someone understand that they can aim away from the hole and be better off than going right at it is something you can't talk about on a driving range.
Right. Right.
So like I said before, I just prefer it. I think it's extremely productive, and people get an immense amount of value out of their time.
Right. And I agree with that. I think that was pretty much the gist of last week's conversation where that was concerned. John, what about you? But I want to add to your discussion a little bit as well, and that is about a sort of a pre-playing lesson warm-up, not just warming up with a few clubs, but do you like to maybe before you get out on the golf course and go through your lesson, maybe have a pre-discussion, kind of like almost like you would your pre-routine as to what we're going to do and what they should expect out on the course during your playing lesson?
That is mandatory in my book to allow the person a better understanding of what to expect. I will tell them point blank, one of the points of emphasis when we're out there is it's not to fix your swing. It's to help you play smarter, help you play better with your current skills. Identify skills that are deficient and capture some data, whether I'm bringing Flight Scope out there or my iPad to videotape, whatever the case may be. So, prior to going out, absolutely, it's told them what to expect. As far as warm-up, it differs based on the program. When I'm doing golf schools, it's a 9-hole on-course instruction experience, so they would have already spent 2 or 3, maybe even 4 hours on the range with me in the morning, and then after lunch go out on the golf course. So I'm going to give them a little bit of time just to get the bones and the joints and the muscles warmed back up, but I've already got a lot of good information from the morning session to have me so I can understand how they may or may not play. Within my coaching programs for the local and regional clients that I have, I include on-course with those. There's no way out of it, no matter what your skill level. So, we're warming up ahead of time. I've already seen you probably at least once, maybe twice. So the only deficiency I have from a data collection standpoint of view may be short game. So all these things come into play. So long as a person's out there understanding, it's not about the mechanics. It's all about. I'm going to paraphrase what Peter said and say it my own way. Can you hit the target? Are you hitting your intended target? Are you doing the necessary things to create a very consistent pre-shot routine? I can't tell you how many times, Peter probably can too, the biggest thing we hear is, I want to be more consistent. Well, if you're not consistent with a pre-shot, how can you be consistent with anything? So on-course is a great place to identify that, really help someone out with that particular part of their game. But to see short game under the pressure situations, that's fantastic. There's no substitute for it. When you're at the practice facility, that's basically a laboratory environment, and you can ask almost anybody to do almost anything, and they'll pretty much accomplish it there. But under the pressure of just being on the course, forget about any competition, forget about people jawing at you or trying to get in your mind at all. Just the pressure of being there, your short game does different things that you're just not aware of. And that's on course. There's no substitute for short game skill assessment. It's a fantastic place to do it. And people ought to recognize, hey, I'd rather go out on the golf course, and I agree with Peter, I'm trying to do more of it because we've gotten so far away from teaching people how to play the game. We're doing a lot of coaching as far as how to ball strike and how to make swings, and we lose the intangible value of it's a game. We got to go out there and teach them how to play, and that's what on course is about. And basically what I just spoke of here, I'm giving that information to someone at lunch, or I'm giving that information to someone in an email or a phone call prior to their arrival, or once they arrive, reiterating it so they're fully aware and have a really clear understanding of what to expect out there.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. And Peter, I think there's other things, in addition to their physical play that we're keeping an eye for, and I think this is something that you have touched on many times here in the Coach's Corner panel, and that is really the emotional standpoint. Things that I'm sure you're looking for is nervousness, indecision, confusion, if you will, on whether or not they're making good choices. So these are things that you can also help them with, in addition to their physical side of their game, is how do they handle pressure situations out in the golf course? Because as John just pointed out, we can pretty much get them to stand on their head and tap their toes 3 times and hit just about any shot we want on the practice tee. But when they get out in the golf course and suddenly they're faced with a downhill lie or a side hill lie, or a plugged lie in a bunker, all bets are off. So are these some of the things that you're looking for, as I mentioned, on the emotional side, indecision and inconsistency with their thought process?
Absolutely. And right off the bat, Ted, that ends up happening is that, especially if it's a person that's coming to me the first time and we're going on the golf course, there's a nervousness level of being out there with me. That I work really hard in the first time, our initial conversation before we tee off the first hole, to let them know that, I'm here for them, to get them to relax as much as possible. But also when it comes to being on the golf course with people, I encourage people to make decisions based on confidence rather than what they feel as though they should do. That's the biggest thing that I see most often is that people, John's touched on this, how we've been on together, they have 230 yards to the hole. They don't have a single club that can get them there, but they feel like they need to pull out a 3-wood and hit it off the deck when they have absolutely no confidence with that shot whatsoever. So really, I frame that up front. And whether they've out there in one of my coaching programs and this is all part of the process or not, I make it very clear up front that, we're here to really, what's your favorite club? Do you have a favorite yardage you like to play from? Let's instead of just hitting whatever club goes the longest, why don't we hit club X so that you have your favorite yardage into the club, even if it's laying back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
It's so if they can start playing at a more confident place rather than what they feel like they should do, or someone's projected on them, or to keep up with the people they're playing with or against. They can play much better without changing a whole lot. And, but once they realize that, they're a little more relaxed. They feel like they can make better shots and end up enjoying it and score better.
Right, exactly. Now, the final thing that I want to talk a little bit about is sort of the post-discussion or review, if you will, after the playing lesson has taken part. John, I'm going to go back to you, and then Peter, I'll let you give your final thoughts as well. But this is something that obviously is important after we've taken them on the course, and whether it's 3 or 9 holes, that we have a post-discussion or review of what's taken place. And then also, I think it's equally important, maybe, and feel free to agree or disagree, but maybe give them an assignment that they can take away and work on. What are your thoughts there, John? What do you typically like to do after a playing lesson? And do you also agree with maybe giving them an assignment based on your observations of that particular playing lesson?
A, B, C, D, and all of the above. Ted, what's funny is when you come off the course, when you come off that last hole, and I do several variations of it, whether it's 2 holes, 4 holes, 9 holes, 1 hole with a clinic where everybody's playing a captain's choice and there could be 8 people out there doing it, everybody to a person's eyes are just wide open. They're absolutely enamored in the self-discovery that just transpired. So to capture that moment, I am always discussing with them throughout and summarizing at the end. What'd you learn out there today? What was new? What was different? How would you go about playing differently the next time you're out there? What did you discover that you didn't know about yourself as a golfer and or as a person? Which goes to Peter's emotional intelligence and emotional control on the golf course. There's so much out there. You try to hit 3 or 4 big time bullets that they can retain. They will actually make in a lot of instances their own homework assignment. Hey, I really need to work on this. When can we schedule the next lesson to work on this? Or what are some drills I can do between now and the next time I see you that not only identifies this skill but strengthens this skill? So it absolutely, just like anything you would do, you want to summarize it, you want to put it in its rightful place with some realistic expectations, not lofty ones. And that rare occasion, that less than 5% occasion where someone has come off the course, they've had that bad day, they just haven't performed up to what they wanted to, whether it's the nervousness being with a pro or they had something to show off and it didn't happen that day. There's still the flip side of the coin from a positive standpoint of view that I try to pull out. I have them recognize so they can walk away a little bit more eyes wide open versus down on themselves. On course is a cure-all, I think, in a lot of senses, and in a lot of ways, where if one thing's not quite right, you can start working on what is going right and focus on solely that aspect and really come away with a very positive experience from both ends, from my end as a coach and from their end as a student.
Yeah, and some excellent points again, John. Thank you. Something, Peter, that you touched on, that one of the things that I like to do during a playing lesson is I like to give the students an opportunity. I want them to play a hole, if you will, as they normally would play it before I interject any thoughts or ask any specific questions. And the scenario that you gave just a moment ago, which we've all seen, I guarantee it, is somebody trying to hit an unrealistic shot. As you pointed out, they're 230 yards from the green, and their thought process is to take out that 3-wood and hit it off the deck. knowing that they don't have the confidence or maybe even the skill ability. So in your post-review, giving that sort of scenario and others that you may have come across, in your post-review or follow-up after a playing lesson, we obviously want it to be positive. We don't want to be hitting with all the don'ts that they shouldn't be doing, but it is important to point some of those things out. How do you find balance when you're doing that, and do you also try to have them take away not just things that they've learned, but things that maybe they can work on before the next time?
Yeah, absolutely. Like John said, all of the above. It's interesting because you have somebody that's doing this, an on-course session for the first time, and they say, "Well, what's this about?" And you say, "This is about you." And yeah, I've written. I just like email follow-ups because it's there. People have it right on their phone; they can refer right back to it. And yeah, whatever we discuss out there is going to be in it. 2-3 major bullet points, and I'll put in capital letters. Do not, if someone pulls out a 3-wood from 230, right. I'm putting in big capital letters. Do not hit 3-wood from 230. It's just, if you point it out and you give them an alternative on how to play that, they're going to appreciate that because you're basically taking into account their ability to hit each shot, their own personal preference on what yardage they'd like, and then it gives them the permission to not hit that shot, because a lot of times they feel like they have to because that's what they see on TV, and we have that whole conversation, and that's. To go back to what I said earlier, that what they can do is sometimes not obvious to them. They feel like they have to hit the shot they should.
Right, and I think, well said, Peter. I think, too, that's something that a lot of our club golfers, particularly out there that are listening, need to take into consideration and really think about this. In this day and age, we really want them to focus on playing their own game. I think part of and again, I'm going to blame the guys here more so than the girls. I think the girls, and I'm talking about students here, tend to be a little bit more open-minded. But, you get guys in a playing lesson in a foursome, and one player that maybe is a little bit more accomplished pulls out a long iron or pulls out the 3-wood, and he's going to go for it. So everybody feels like that peer pressure that they've got to do it as well. And we obviously want our players to be able to play their own game. And our job as instructors and coaches, obviously, is to present them with options. Instead of taking that club out here, here's another option, or even 2 options that you may want to consider. Because ultimately, what we want to do at the end of the day is it's not just all about learning to hit the ball better, but learning how to score better, so that when they go out there, instead of struggling to break 100, maybe now they're going to break 90 for the first time, or maybe some of the players that are a little bit better, they might be able to break 80. And this is really what we're trying to get at here, is to help them go out and improve as they go along. For too long we've seen many players, and the stats don't lie. Handicaps haven't gone down very much over the last few decades, and part of that reason is the unreasonable and unrealistic expectations that a lot of golfers put on themselves. And I think we're a little bit to blame for that, because, as John, you pointed out, we need to start tailoring our clinics a little bit more away from just learning how to hit the ball well, but learning how to play on the golf course, and that's really what the playing lessons are all about. Guys, that's all the time we have on the Coach's Corner panel tonight. I've got to get ready for next guest, but as always, I want to give you guys an opportunity to reach out to the listeners and let them know how they can reach out to you. So, John, I'm going to let you go first, and then Peter.
Sure. Again, Peter, great to be with you. It seems like every second Thursday of the month we're together on the Coach's Corner. It's a thrill and a pleasure. I appreciate the the things I learned from you, and hope your playing recently will take a seed and grow for you. I know that's always exciting to jump back into the playing arena. From a John Hughes Golf standpoint of view, just add a hashtag, add a @ in front of it, an ampersand in front of it, and that's me. JohnHughesGolf.com is the web page. I'm beginning to roll out some summer specials. One of them is as I mentioned before, Play Golf Now. You can find that information on my website and actually register online. A lot of other things going on, but the two biggest things, if you want some follow-up information, is to call me, 407-852-8547, or email me, john@johnhughesgolf.com, and look for, in about 6 minutes, my monthly video tip. You can find that on YouTube. It will be announced through social media. And look for every third Thursday, my blog tip of the month, a regular thing I'm doing, and hopefully by next month I'll have a couple other things to promote.
Perfect. As always, John, it's a pleasure. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, John, likewise. It's always great to be on with you. You're right. It seems like we're here together quite a bit, but we're always learning from you. And thanks. Getting back into the competitive thing is always great. I just like to test myself, and but a lot of fun. But people can reach me at on social. I'm at Daily Golf Coach. My website is gogolfcoach.com. And if you have any questions, go to the website. You can message me right in the lower right-hand corner. And I'm happy to just reach back out to you and pretty much immediately, and whatever I can do to help, please let me know. If you would like to come visit Western Massachusetts, it is absolutely beautiful this time of year. The facility, Taconic Golf Club, is absolutely stunning. Great views. So if you'd like to do that, please reach out. And my email and phone are right on the website as well. But thanks so much, Ted, and great to be on with you.
Well, perfect. And Peter and John, as always, thank you very much for giving of your time and spending another great first half of the show on Coach's Corner panel. It's always interesting to have you guys and get your perspectives on how we can help some of our fellow golfers out there. So, guys, have a great week and weekend. Enjoy this week's U.S. Open. I think it's going to be an exciting one. So enjoy watching it on the weekend. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ted. Have a great one.
You too, guys. All right, that was my very special guests on the Coach's Corner panel, John Hughes and Peter Egazarian, two great golf professionals. And as they just pointed out, you can check them out on all sorts of different areas on social media. And a couple of great professionals. Always enjoy having them on the Coach's Corner panel. All right, I'm very excited tonight to have my next guest on here. He's, of course, my interview guest. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He was originally going to be on back in May, and unfortunately some things came up and he wasn't able to join me. So we rescheduled, and I've got him here tonight, and I'm very excited for a number of reasons. But let me just tell you a little bit about him, and then I'll bring him on the show. My very special guest this evening, of course, is Chris Rodell. He's an author and writer of a new great book called Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King. His writing has appeared in several very prestigious publications, including Sports Illustrated, Esquire, Men's Health, Golf, and, of course, Arnold Palmer's Kingdom magazine. In Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King, which, of course, is his latest book, published by Triumph Books, Latrobe, Pennsylvania resident and personal friend of Palmer's, Chris Rodell, offers a new take on the legendary figure. Drawing on more than 100 interviews and conducted over decades of acquaintance, Rodell delves in Palmer's character away from the game, examining Palmer's relationship to his hometown and its people. The insights and anecdotes showcase a different side of Palmer than most of us are used to seeing, giving fans a glimpse of the king passing up his throne for a bar stool, if you will, and Magnolia Lane for Main Street, and the big stage for small towns. So let me welcome my very special guest this evening, Chris Rodell.
Hi,
Good evening, Chris, and welcome to Golf Talk. I'm doing very well. Welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. It's my honor to have you here. I want to start out, I think, Chris, before we get into the book, we're gonna talk a little bit. We're not going to give away too much of the book, obviously, because we want people to go out and get one in their hot little hands. And by the way, it's a fantastic read. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. Yeah, thank you for having a copy sent out. I want to talk about a couple of things, and then we'll get into a little bit about the book. Talk about the first time that you met with Arnold Palmer. First off, how did you meet, and what were your impressions? Were they similar to what you knew about him from what you'd seen and read or heard? Tell us a little bit about that first meeting.
Well, there's kind of several stages to that. One, I met him very briefly at the driving range at Laurel Valley. I was on assignment for Golf Magazine doing a story about golfers' first holes in one. And he was carrying his own bag to the parking lot, which was kind of unusual for any golfer there. And I went up to him and I said, he just had a kind of a twinkle in his eye, and, when he greets you with that warm thumbs up and that. And I said, do you have time for some questions? He said, sure, go ahead. And so I said, which mattered more to you, your first hole in one or your first kiss? And I realized then, how much he loved that playful approach like that. And he said, the first kiss. And I said, what? No, he said the first hole in one. And I said, why is that? He goes, it just meant so much more to me. But then there was the other time that I was privileged to sit down with him. The first sit-down interview, I was very nervous. And I said to him, it was about his dog Mulligan. And I said, what's an old rule stickler like you doing with a Mulligan? And he was right in the middle of signing autographs. He spent about 3 hours each and every day signing autographs and mailing them around the country at his own expense. And he goes, there's nothing wrong with a mulligan. He goes, we have a mulligan at the first hole here every day. Anybody's allowed to take a mulligan on number one. And so I said, is Mulligan a good on-course dog? And he said, no, he's lousy. And I said, why is that? He goes, probably because he chases after the balls and slobbers them up. And I said, how did he learn that? And he goes, well, I spend about a day, half hour every day out back here with a pitching wedge and a tennis ball. And I hit it, and the dog chases it. And I said, boy, I'd really like to see that. And he goes, come on. He put the pen down, and then we were like two kids playing hooky, and I realized how much of a gesture there was thing, he just loved that. But then the one that really kind of broke the ice for me with him was when I started doing the Q&As for Kingdom Magazine, and these were like, they weren't like the quick 10-minute interviews. These were like hour-long sit-downs that had freedom to talk about everything. There was golf, aviation, history, and life, in essence. And I said I was always haunted by the ghost of my father when I would go in there, and he was saying, you be proper, don't be a smart aleck, don't swear, be respectful, this is Arnold Palmer. And so I said, Mr. Palmer, I want you to know how much I enjoy hearing your historic aspects of all these great events. And he said, and I want you to know how much I enjoy you coming here blowing so much sweet smoke up my posterior, let's say. So that's kind of like the icebreaker that really brought down the barriers. And I realized he was just like the guys that I would joke around with in the local bars. And he was no different from these regular guys that would fix your furnace and work on your car. And, he liked a good joke and liked to laugh and never, ever took himself so seriously. He always kind of didn't like being called the king because he goes, nobody's the king. He goes, golf is bigger than that. But he was just a lot of fun.
Yeah. One of the things that impressed me, and you've just touched on it, about Arnold Palmer, and I think this is why, Chris, that he was so beloved, and I'm going to ask you that question in a second, but is the fact that he was just sort of a regular Joe, and that's really what prompted the Arnie's Army. Why do you think, based on your time getting to know him, and obviously the fact that you're from the same area, why do you think he was so loved by so many people?
I think it was because there's the Arnold Palmer that died worth $800 million, but the Arnold Palmer who lived acted like just every other guy. And the way he lived, anybody could live like. I say that only a handful of golfers on the whole planet will ever know what it's like to golf like Arnold Palmer, but every single one of us could live like Arnold Palmer. We could be charitable, we could be gracious, we could be bold, we can be playful. We can treat the guy that works on our car the same as we treat the guy that works on our heart. He had no barriers as far as status with anyone. He treated every single person the same. And it was fun to see him revel in talking with the guys that work in the clubhouse. You know, he treated them just the same as he would a CEO from Marriott or anywhere like that.
Right. Yeah, and that brings me really to my next question is, you know, Arnold obviously had, again, whether it be the CEO from Marriott or even several presidents in his day that he had the honor and pleasure of meeting, but again, treated them certainly cordial in certain situations. Obviously, he had to be respectful based on their positions, but at the same time, they were just regular people in his eyes. And I think that's was part of the appeal. And you're exactly right. You know, obviously Arnie liked to fly. He had a private jet that he enjoyed flying and piloting. I think just as much. You may know this better, but just as much as golf.
That's correct.
But
you're absolutely correct.
Right. But as far as the people, who impressed him? I mean, again, he met all kinds of very famous, very well-to-do people. But was there anybody that really impressed him? Not necessarily individual, but the type of person that impressed him the most?
I think he would get most gooey over anybody in the military or police and law enforcement. You know, he had a real soft spot for those guys, women that are on the line out there, and he would go way out of his way to make them feel at home and happy and make them proud and let them know how much they meant to him. You know, and that I think was everybody will say that, the military guys and the law enforcement. He would go out of his way to show them every courtesy he could.
Yeah, and I think part of that, Chris, and you may agree with this, is I think that the fact that they were willing to serve others with not only their lives in some cases, they were certainly, many cases had to risk their lives in both the case of military and law enforcement, but they were in service of others. And that was something that I believe Arnold, again, based on the person, I mean, obviously I never had the pleasure of meeting him face-to-face as you have done, but just over the years getting to watch him. I mean, he and Nicholas and that generation is who I grew up watching golf. And it was just the way, you know, I think the thing to me that differentiated him, and again, I mean, no disrespect to any of the other players, both past and there, is he was a regular guy. And, you know, he was, like you said, he could be like an uncle that came over to visit, or shoot the bull with you, but he just had a great golf game, you know, to be envied. But he didn't care about that. He didn't sit there, and it wasn't, you know, I'm up here and you're down there. He met you eye to eye, face to face, as though you were somebody special. He treated you like somebody special, and that's what I've heard many, many times people say, and I'm sure that's some of the feedback and some of the commentary that you've gotten when you're putting this book together. Yeah, that's true. You know, like I was impressed by when I got the contract for the book. And I love this about living in a small town. I called the editor up of the Latrobe Bulletin and said, "I'm doing a book about Arnold Palmer. I want to get the best Arnold Palmer stories." He said, "How about this? You write it and we'll put it on our front page." So I wrote my own story, and I said, "I want to hear your best Arnold Palmer stories." And I put my phone number and my email address, and then I just sat down and typed what they said. You know, people would call up with these great stories, and some of them were so minor, but it just showed how much of an impact he made on them. One sweet woman said she remembered the time that they were both getting contact lenses at the same time, and he stopped to talk for her with about 15 minutes. And it just made such an impression on her that he would do this. And then there's stories like the one friend of mine, he was a bartender at one of the bars, and he said he goes into the Giant Eagle, the local grocery store, and he sees Arnold Palmer with a friend of his. And he says, "Mr. Palmer, we've never met, but your wife gets your dog groomed at my wife's place." And so they have this small town connection. And Arnold Palmer thinks he's there to play the lottery. So he goes, "You here to play the lottery? Let's play the lottery together. We'll split what we win." He goes, "Give me $20. So the guy said, he goes, "I reach into my wallet, and all I have is $20. And I give my last $20 to Arnold Palmer, who at the time was worth about $500 million. So they bought $40 worth. They didn't win a thing. And Arnold said, "Oh, well, you win some, you lose some." And the guy said, "Yeah, you win a hell of a lot more than I have." But I love those stories, you know, that you're in a Giant Eagle up to pick up some milk and some pretzels. You run into Arnold Palmer, and you have a chance to win, you know, $200 million on the lottery with Arnold Palmer. Yeah. And what a story that would have made, especially if they had have won. Even you know, I mean, that would be something special. You know, Chris, something else that always impressed me was, and you touched on this a few moments ago, was his ability to and willingness to reach out. I mean, one of the complaints that I've heard, you know, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a number of golf professionals. In fact, I interviewed the late Billy Casper, who was also very humble in his not only his beginnings but throughout his career. But there's a disconnect between a lot of today's players and the players of Palmer's generation. One thing that stood out about Arnold Palmer is the fact his willingness to connect with his audience and with his fan base. And as you touched on, he would, you know, spend several hours a day not only doing autographs but responding to letters that he received personally. Talk a little bit about that. Why was that so important to him?
Well, I said it was like today we have social media with our eyes closed. He was social media when it was being social and looking people in the eye and giving them a firm handshake. He didn't do it because he knew that someday they'd be customers and maybe buy Cadillacs or his dry cleaning business at the time. He did it because that's the way he was raised, to treat everybody with kindness. One of the things I really loved, and this is in the book, was they found 2 months after his death, they found a letter in his desk. And it was to some people that had brought him some peaches from York, Pennsylvania. They were relative strangers. But his last act before he was taken to the hospital where he died was to write a letter to some strangers thanking them for peaches. It wasn't a letter saying, let's buy this property, let's sue this guy. It was just a humble gesture. And that letter will be handed down generation after generation to these farmers up there, and it'll be something to treasure forever. And that he knew how to change the world. You know, you don't do a text or something like that. You send an actual letter and you put your signature on it so that people can read it. And he did that. Like I said, he did that about 3 hours a day. And if he skipped a day, the pile didn't get shorter. It just doubled. You know, he had 6 hours the next day he'd have to do. He's the only golfer that didn't have like back pains. He had writer's cramp.
Right. Yeah, and justifiably so. I mean, I know. Yeah. From many of the interviews that I've seen on the Golf Channel, and we'll talk about that here in just a second as well. You know, there were always references to the numerous letters that he would write, and that was the interesting thing too. Was and again, things may have changed a little bit as he got in his later years and health issues struck. But you know, he didn't just say, "Well, here's so and so. I'm going to dictate a letter to you." He hand wrote. Yeah. Those letters. He believed in personally, not just handing it off to, you know, a plethora of secretaries or somebody else to respond to. He took the time himself to respond individually, and that also says a lot about his character, correct?
Oh, correct. And, you know, he would do it there were so many instances of letters he would write to CEOs, or there's one from a golf coach. He wrote a letter to a golf coach on behalf of a kid that was playing on the high school golf team. He said, he's an outstanding player and person. I would hope you would consider him for a scholarship. And the coach got this letter, and he told me he was at High Point College in North Carolina. And he said, he goes, I got this letter. It had Arnold Palmer on the return address. I couldn't believe it. I almost didn't want to open it. He said, I opened it, and it said, please bring this kid in for a scholarship. I don't think he'll regret it. I said, what did you do? He goes, I did what Arnold Palmer told me to do. You know, he just was so blown away to get this letter. But he would do that. He got one guy a job at Pennzoil when the kid was like out of school, and he'd been a caddy. He'd been a favorite caddy of his. And he said, I would hope you guys would give consideration to hiring this guy. The guy has just concluded a 40-year career with Pennzoil, where he had hired about 6 other people that he knew from Latrobe, and it was all on the basis of that letter. And the letter, he said, I go, do you still have the letter? He said, no, the boss kept it. And he said, he wished he'd had it, but the boss got the letter, and he said, no, I'm keeping this for me. So,
right. You know, it just, again, goes to show the generosity of Arnold Palmer, willing to reach out to, you know, to common folk, if you will, which he considered himself to be, regardless of whatever was in, you know, however many zeros were in his bank account. Arnold considered himself to be one of the people who had certainly many fortunate things happen to him over his time, but he never forgot where he came from, and he truly understood that. Let's talk a little bit about the Golf Channel, because you referenced this. Obviously, you've got a chapter to that. What was his thought process in behind, starting the Golf Channel? Why did he want to do that, from your understanding?
Well, I think on so many of these great investments he had, he was just acting on gut instinct. I remember he said, somebody said, "Who's going to want to watch golf 24 hours a day?" And he said, "I would." And so he knew that there would be an interest for a golf nut like him. And he thought there was a lot of people out there that would do it. And it grew into one of the most successful cable television channels ever. And it was the same way with Arizona TV. He said, somebody came in and said, "We'd like to make this based on that drink, the Arnold Palmer that you made." And he goes, "Okay." And I just read in Fortune magazine last year that made $40 million for the Palmer estate. So it's still, that brand is so successful that it's continuing posthumously.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's a great drink too. I love it.
It is.
So thank you. Thank you. Yeah, a thumbs up to you, Arnie, for that. He had some. I remember, as I said, obviously as a youngster, much of this happened. I'm 54 now, so I'm slowly climbing the ladder myself. I've still got many years hopefully left, but
I'm one rung ahead of you.
Right. I remember seeing Arnold in a lot of commercials over the years, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not a big fan of celebrity endorsements, but there was just something about Arnold Palmer that I don't care what he was selling, you wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
What was it about the message?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, what about the message do you think it was? I mean, he sold a lot of things. Was it just the fact that people knew and understood that he was just a genuine person? Is that, you think, was sort of the caveat? Because,
I think it's just shown through, You could see in the way he played golf, that he was relaxed and he was charging, and he just had. I like. There's a quote from Kirk Douglas, who was a very charismatic actor, and they asked him. They said, "Who's the most charismatic man you've ever seen?" And he said, "It wasn't Ronald Reagan. It wasn't John Wayne. It wasn't Frank Sinatra." He goes, "It's Arnold Palmer." He goes, "Nobody has the charisma that Arnold Palmer had," and that's coming from Kirk Douglas. So, and I think that kind of appeal can't be explained. I like the story in there about the dentist. One of my favorite stories in it, and this eventually involves his smile, but this dentist was a 13-year-old boy. He saw Arnold Palmer at a exhibition, and he said he had so much charisma. He goes, "I just wanted to grow up to be just like him." And 3 years later, he became friends with Arnold Palmer's daughter, but he didn't make the connection because there was numerous Palmers in the neighborhood. And so he went to the door and knocked on the door of his friend Amy Palmer's house, and he said, Arnold Palmer answered the door. And he said, "I couldn't figure out what this professional golfer was doing in my friend's house." And so he just was discombobulated by that. But then 4 years after that, Arnold Palmer wrote him a letter for a scholarship at dental school. He got that. 3 years after that, he became Arnold Palmer's dentist, and Arnold Palmer asked him to golf together. And he spent the last 30 years of Arnold Palmer's life being his regular golf buddy. So he went from this boy who grew up idolizing him. And the anecdote I like is he said, when Winnie Palmer died in 1998, he said he could see Arnold Palmer was, frustrated and just being pulled in so many directions. He said, "Arnold, get in the cart." He said, "I drove him out to the farthest part of the golf course, and together we put our arms around each other and wept." And I just love that story of the local boy who was 13 years old, crying in the arms of his idol all these years later. Now, to get back to what you said about what made things sell, Arnold Palmer was saying as a patient, he goes, "Do you think we should do something to whiten my teeth?" He goes, I'm not happy with how dingy my smile has become." And the dentist said, he goes, "Arnold, that is one of the most popular smiles on the planet." He goes, "People trust that smile, and it sells so many things." He goes, "We are not touching that smile."
Right. Words to live by. Yeah, I agree. There was just something about him, and as I alluded to earlier, early on in his career, of course, he had a tremendous amount of success, and he was also instrumental not only in the Golf Channel but pre-Golf Channel in really bringing golf to television. I mean, it was Arnold Palmer that really started that movement, if you will, and of course the onslaught of Arnie's Army. And I'm sure you've had an opportunity, not just the residents of Latrobe, but people that followed Arnie, if you will, to have a chance to talk with a few of those. Maybe share a story or two of people that watched him play on the golf course and what their responses were.
Well, he was just, they always talk about how the ball flew differently, that it had a different trajectory. And I remember seeing this when I was about 10 in Oakmont in 1978, I think it was, at the PGA at Oakmont. And my dad, was following him every step of the way. And I remember seeing the ball, it would start out really low, like about 50 yards off, about 50 feet off the ground, and then it would get about 150 yards out there and just take off, like something you'd see off a flight of a aircraft carrier. And so a lot of people would mention that. But these same people from all over the country always talked about his magnetism and how he would look everybody in the eye. There's so many great stories about when he was, after 9/11, the tournament was played at the Pennsylvania Classic was being played at Laurel Valley, not far from our home here. And they had to cancel it after 9/11, and they moved it 2 weeks later. And you remember Flight 93 happened not far from here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And there was like about 100 people in the galleries watching him tee off on the fifth hole. And every hole that I saw him on, and these people told me, they said he made eye contact with every single person in that crowd. Like he took it on himself to convey strength and perseverance, that we were going to get through this. And he just did that on the tee. He made eye contact with people. He wasn't caring about his game that much, and he just knew that he could help people carry on and during this tough time. And he could read the mood of the public really well. And I think that's something that never failed him. And that's the kind of things that people would tell over and over again too.
Yeah, and there were other parts. I mean, obviously he had a lot of other business interests in that, and obviously one of them was his golf course design, which there are, of course, many literally around the globe. That was also something that he enjoyed a lot, and it wasn't, again, it wasn't because of the money. He just enjoyed being around the game. And he obviously had a lot of a great team that worked with and for him.
Oh yeah.
What did some of them maybe that you've talked to have to say about being in that environment with Arnie?
Well, everybody I think comes at it like I did. You have this reverence, and you have to get over that because you can't function if you're treating him like that, because he breaks it down right away. And some of those people said, the first time I met him, I was kind of quaking in my shoes, and then he told a little joke and put me right at ease and. And you could tell, he flattered them too. He said, this is a mutual love of ours. We're going to make some great golf courses together. And his motivation for that was he just loved spreading the game around and watching it grow. And one of the last questions I asked him was, do you believe there's golf in heaven? And he said, oh, yeah. He goes, I'm sure there is. There's probably Hogan and Nelson are playing up there right now. And then he started breaking it down into what the courses would look like the golf course designer that he was. He said, because there's probably some clouds for hazards, and then you probably got angels around the gallery playing their harps. And so, but he really reveled in designing golf courses. It was a passion of his. And some of those golf courses are outstanding, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. And he was instrumental. It's funny recently because I was actually through there not too long ago, but one of the courses that he was involved with, of course, is in Central Florida in the Villages. And, of course, he was, and this, just a sidestep for just a second, I watched a great video, YouTube video recently about the Villages, and one of the who happens to also be a resident there, is Nancy Lopez. And, of course, she has one of the other great courses there. And one of the interesting things that she said in that video was about how generous and giving Arnold Palmer was in helping her with her design. Even though she put her own earmarks on it, he was very helpful to her. So it just goes to show you the type of individual that he was reaching out to anybody, and certainly not trying to suggest that Nancy Lopez is anybody, but because she was well accomplished herself. But you know what I'm saying? she was a little bit nervous, she said in the video, about, coming up with this championship golf course, and he sort of helped put her some final brush strokes, if you will, to help it be successful as well. So, he didn't just do it for his own self-interest. He did it to help other people, and that was something very apparent.
He was.
Let me go to the beginning. Yeah, let me go to the beginning of the book, because the foreword was written by Gary Player. You obviously, Gary was a huge fan and supporter of Arnold Palmer over the years. Always spoke very kindly of him. What was the discussion that you had with him to do the foreword?
Well, I told him I was doing this book, and I said it centers on small town America can still produce men like Arnold Palmer and Fred Rogers, who is also from Latrobe. It's in the hearts of these people, even in divisive times, that we can pull together. And there's people coming out of our neighborhoods like this all over the country. And I told him that, it was a very pro-American approach. And Gary was all for that. And he had such an affection for Arnold Palmer. He was happy to do it. And I told him the story. One of my favorite stories was that these were the Q&As with Kingdom Magazine, where I could really banter with him. And I said it was 2013 that Gary Player was posing nude on the cover of ESPN the magazine. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He was about 73 years old, and they had strategically placed trophies so you couldn't see it. And he was bragging about his fitness. And I said, and this is how competitive the two of them were. I said, Mr. Palmer, Gary Player is nude on the cover of ESPN the magazine. I said he's bragging about his fitness routine. He said he never drinks alcohol, never eats bacon, and does about 300 push-ups a day. I said, what is your fitness regimen? Knowing he had none. And he goes, well, I drink a hell of a lot of K1 vodka. And he started joking. Then he goes, it's good that people are doing what Gary says, because that's a healthy approach to life. And, he got back on track. But I could see it was still bothering him. So I asked him another question. He was still kind of fidgety. He kind of sleptwalked through it. I asked him a third question. He kind of was brief. In the middle of the fourth question, he said, oh, and Gary Player eats bacon when no one's watching.
Yeah, I had a feeling that Gary's not, Yeah. Let me ask you something about Arnold, and I don't want to stray too far away from the book, but Arnold obviously had played with so many great, he sort of led the charge very early on before Nicklaus came on, and then of course Nicklaus hit the road and was met with a lot of resistance because Arnold was such a popular figure. But again, Arnie had a way of sort of putting his arm around you and bringing you into his fold, if you will, and then suddenly it was like a veil had been lifted, and all of a sudden Jack Nicklaus was well on his way. But it was a difficult transition, but Arnold paved the way. Was there anybody on tour during his day that Arnold confided into you and said, you know what, he was one guy that I played against that I worried about?
You mean playing against and losing to?
Yes.
No, he was so ultra competitive and confident. He said that he would hit some of these amazing shots and just think, I couldn't believe it didn't go the way I planned it. And with Nicklaus, it was the same way. That rivalry was so intense and so great. There was a couple of times they talked about how they were in the clubhouse watching each other, just trying to beat each other, and Al Geiberger snuck up and beat them both. And they were like astounded at New Orleans. And they were like, how the heck did he come out of nowhere? And they said, I thought it was just you and I. But he was so singularly focused. And that competitive streak, again, it never ended. He was always like that. I tell the story about the one time with Clint Eastwood. We were doing a story about Westerns, and I said, did you know John Wayne? He said, no, but I'm good friends with Clint Eastwood. And he said, we own Pebble Beach together, and I did know that. And he wasn't bragging. They bought Pebble Beach for like $899 million in 1999, him and Peter Ubroff and another group. He wasn't bragging. He was saying it like I say, my wife and I own all 6 seasons of Third Rock from the Sun on DVD. You're not bragging. You're just stating the fact. And I said, he said, we had dinner with Clint last week. And I said, how's he doing? He said, well, he's like me. We're both 86 years old and both having the same kind of problems. And this is when we were such friends, that we could banter like this. I said, who would win a wrestling match right now between you and Clint Eastwood? And he said, I'd kick his ass. You know, he was so competitive right away. And I said, right, and then he thought he had said something wrong, and he goes, well, he has a stuntman. He goes, I do my own stunts. So
right. And I think he was probably telling the truth. Clint, I know was a tough guy, but Arnie, I think was as humble and sweet as he could be. I think was pretty tough himself. So he would have been a good stunt person to fill in for. Sorry, go ahead.
If we could have gotten a pay-per-view of that wrestling match between the two of them, my money worries would be over forever. To see an 86-year-old Clint Eastwood wrestling an 86-year-old Arnold Palmer, the whole world would tune in.
Oh, for sure. I want to talk, and as I know it's difficult for a lot of people, even to this day, to kind of wrap their minds around. But we saw Arnold, later in his life as he was sort of unwinding his professional golf career as a player. We saw him at the Masters and then U.S. Opens and so forth, where he basically was saying, my time is up, and that was a very emotional, as we all witnessed in that. But for the fans, it was equally emotional. And a little bit sudden in some cases. Everybody, I think, kind of understood that Arnold's getting older and was having some health issues, but again, he was very, very private. Talk about his final days a little bit, what you understand from where things went, and some of the conversations that you had afterwards that people talked about him in general.
Yeah, well, I saw him 6 months before he died. And I saw him after that, too. But with 6 months to go before he died, he looked like a man with 6 months to live. He did not look well at all. He was on a walker. He had a foot infection. He'd been hobbled by his shoulder that had broken when he tripped over his dog. And he had a mouthful of infected teeth. He was down to 8 teeth. And at the end, I had a friend of mine was in town, and we took a tour of the office, and Doc Giffen, my good friend who's been Arnold Palmer's assistant for 50 years, would always say, now, you can't meet Arnold today. He's probably busy or something. He might not be feeling well. But Arnold Palmer never once put up any blockade. He would say, he goes, come on in, I want to meet you guys. And this day, when anybody with any vanity would have stayed in bed and not come out to meet the public, he was up, giving a thumbs up to my friend. He couldn't even talk. And it was kind of really startling. But the thing was, he got in. They helped him out back after he had said hello very quickly. They helped him out back, put his walker in the golf cart, and put him in the driver's seat. And he zoomed off down the road. Now, somebody said, did he have a death wish? I said, no, he had a life wish. He was not going to be deterred by any physical ailments like that. And they called me up about 4 months later and said, can you do an interview with him? And I said, I can ask him the questions, but I don't think he's up to the answers. They said, no, they assured us he's in good enough shape to do that. And so I went in there, and he was very rejuvenated. He looked good, and he was talking. He wasn't on a walker, and I thought he was going to make a real turnaround there. And it was a joyful time. I wish I'd have given him a big hug. If I'd have known that was the last time I'd have seen him, I'd have given him a hug just to say how much he meant to me and to so many other people. But he died 35 days after that. He was going to the hospital, and he always said he wanted to die like his father, of a massive heart attack. And he died going from his room to the operating room, where they were going to try and save his life. So it was so massive they couldn't save him on the way.
It's obviously very sad to lose anybody, but especially somebody of his caliber. And I don't mean that from a professional golfer standpoint, but just as a human being. What are you going to take away? What did you take away from Palmer that you think will maybe change your life? What about him or your experiences with him that have give you pause to think and say, you know what, I want to be a little bit more like that, or I want to do a little more of that in my life? Is there anything that you can think of?
It's always, I've always been cheerful and positive about the future. But with him, you feel compelled to share that with more people. And like I said, also from Latrobe, we had Fred Rogers, who was another one of our angels there. And so you had that going on. But with me, like if someone does me a kindness, I write them a letter. I'm very big on writing letters now because I know what he would do. And it just means so much more than a text or an email, something people are going to just look at once and throw away. But, and again, like I really think it's the people in Latrobe that put this kind of pressure on you to be nice and not let things go to your head. You know, I'm having some real success with this book, and the people of Latrobe have been just unbelievably supportive of it and great about buying it. And I really sit down and listen to their stories, and I try and be like an Arnold Palmer apostle. You know, I can't help them with their golf games or anything like that, but I can listen to their stories about Arnold Palmer and be touched by them. You know, I try not to look over somebody's shoulder when they're telling me a story. I try and give them my full attention, eye contact, firm handshake, and I'm trying to make my handwriting better so it's more legible like his autograph was too.
Right. Yeah, that's something I need a little work on myself. So,
yeah. I signed so many of these books, and I know people, there's so much in the book about his impeccable handwriting, and I know they go back and look at mine and say, well, this guy sure fails at that one, but I'm trying my best. What's the overall message, Chris, that you want people to take away from reading this book? Well, again, I go back to that only a handful of golfers, and I say that this is not a golf book at all, it's a life book. And only a handful of golfers will ever know what it's like to play golf like Arnold Palmer. But every single person on the planet, regardless of money or status, can live like Arnold Palmer. You can treat children and old people kindly. You can be patient. You can be friendly. You can be cheerful. You can eat all the bacon you want, unlike Gary Player. But it's just a humility thing. You know, you can be bold and go for greens in two, and we can all live like he did. That's a joyful lesson. I couldn't agree more. Chris, how can the folks that are tuning in tonight that would maybe like to get their hands on a copy of this book, where do they need to go, and what's the best way to get a copy? Well, you can get it on Amazon.com, obviously, and Barnes & Noble stocking it. And if you want autographed copies, you can email me at storyteller@chrisrodell.com or at chrisrodell.com website. And I've been sending them all over the country. The great thing about this book is I've had so many people buy 10, 20 at a time. It's really been a sensation already. It's only been out for a month, and I've sold so many books just to people in my neighborhood, all these Latrobe people, and I'm just gratified. And I think so much of it is just because people hunger to hear more stories about Arnold Palmer and that a man like that really existed. You know, that's the question people would always ask you, what was he really like? And for years I would jokingly say he was cool, refreshing, and authentic. If Arnold Palmer was a drink, he'd be an Arnold Palmer. But he was just, I said, if the greatest generation only had Arnold Palmer, it would still be the greatest generation because of Arnold Palmer. Yeah, he definitely was, I won't say one of a kind, because as you pointed out earlier, I think there's a lot of great people out there that have their own story. He was obviously become iconic just by virtue of being more in the public eye, but he certainly was somebody that we can all aspire to. He had so many great qualities, and I think that that's something unfortunately gets lost in today's society with just things going on. But one final question I'm going to ask you, Chris, and that is, do you play golf? Yes, I do. Any tips that Arnold gave you that maybe you'd like to share? Well, he gave minor ones. Most of them dealt with using the putter around the greens instead of chipping it. You've seen pros with chip yips. And he said, if you can putt it, always putt it. But the one time, one of the best tips he ever gave me was I was playing Oakmont the next day. And I said, Mr. Palmer, I'm playing the great Oakmont tomorrow. I said, do you have any tips on how I can get a good score? And he said, yes, my tip is play someplace else. He was right. He obviously had a very refreshing sense of humor. That's right. I love that. I love that. Well, Chris, Chris, I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for joining me this evening on Golf Talk Live.
I wanted to delve a little bit into the book and allow you an opportunity to share some of the stories, but not too much because I want people to go out and read it for themselves. But thanks for sharing some great stories about the man himself, Arnold Palmer. He truly was a very humble man. I won't call him the king, even though that was a title given to him, because I think he was better than that. He was just a decent, genuine human being that deserved a lot of respect, and he certainly has gotten mine over the years. But Chris, thank you very much for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live, and much continued success with the book. And I hope that you will keep doing your journey in life, and that you can draw from some of the experiences that you had with Arnold.
Thank you, Ted. It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Have a great evening, and again, much continued success with the book. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was my very special guest tonight on Golf Talk Live, Chris Rodell. Great writer, speaker, and author of his latest book, Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King, from, of course, Latrobe, Pennsylvania, Arnold Palmer's hometown, and just shared some great stories and anecdotes, if you will, of the late Arnold Palmer. He certainly is missed by many people, not only within the golfing community, but also literally around the world. He truly was a wonderful man. Again, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to meet him face-to-face, as Chris and so many others did, but I feel in some small way from watching him as I grew up and listening to many of the stories that I've heard over the years and here tonight, I feel like I got to know a little bit about the man himself, and I've always admired and respected Mr. Palmer. Again, thanks to the guys on the Coaches Corner panel, John Hughes and Peter Egazarian. Thanks, guys, for doing a fantastic job, as always, on the Coaches Corner panel. Always enjoy it. And again, thanks to my special guest this evening, Chris Rodell, author of Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King, which you can get a copy by visiting Amazon.com, and also check out your local Barnes & Noble. They're going to be stocking the shelves with that, and I'm sure they're going to be flying off the shelves equally as quick. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show this evening. I will be back next week, of course, with another great show. I want to take this last opportunity to thank all of you, my listeners, for faithfully tuning in each and every week to the show. And it's really through your listenership and through some of the great guests that have been on, including the many talented coaches, teach professionals, authors, and entrepreneurs that have stopped by the show. And it's really through their participation and guest appearances that have helped to make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. So thank you to all of them, and thank you especially to all of you for tuning in each and every week. Keep things going. I always love hearing from you, and those that have reached out to me over the years with some thoughts and ideas on what you'd like to hear. I appreciate that. Keep them coming. Thanks to some of the special sponsors and supporters of the program: Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide, Meredith Kirk from Meredith Kirk Golf out in Myrtle Beach, Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, Mr. Bernie Pinder, owner of OnTicGolf.com, and Sean Kelly, owner of LinkedGolfers.com, and, of course, my friend over in Ireland, Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions. Thanks, guys, for all of your continued support of the show. And don't forget to join me next Tuesday as I welcome back my good friend and co-host, LPGA Professional Legends Tour player Cindy Miller. We'll have some catching up to do on the Women of Golf show next Tuesday from 9 to 10 Eastern. That's a.m. Eastern here on the blogtalkradio.com network. And again, I will be back next Thursday evening from 6 to 8 with another round of Coach's Corner and another insightful interview with one of my special guests. So make sure you tune in. God bless everybody. Have a great weekend and enjoy the U.S. Open. And happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there. Have a great one, guys. Bye-bye.